wide web. This is the mystery school, or the movement mystery. I can't even get it out. It's such a mystery. The Movement Medicine Mystery School podcast number 1. We are joining today with my best soul sister, Kat Da Silva, and I will get into her intro in just a moment. And this has been a dream and an aspiration of mine for a couple of years now I just know all of these amazing, amazing people. And I love the idea of jumping in and getting to know them even deeper through their passions. And I love asking really provocative questions and having provocative investigations and inquiries and, just getting deep with people. And when I was doing a 30-day live broadcast on why I love dancing, I was just like, I'm going to take this and run with it. And I love the idea of going into the mystery school theme with this and just really getting into some juicy conversations with people around what is this mystery of life and how do we unfold it, and so much more. I mean, it's a mystery to me of what this is going to be about, and that's kind of how I like to flow. Kat and I were just talking about, I sent her some questions and she didn't even want to look at them today because she just wants to be in the flow with what comes up. And I'm like, beautiful. That's exactly what I want for this podcast. So, and if I didn't introduce myself, I'm Holly McCormick. Yeah, that's me. All right. All right. So Kat, I have known Kat for about 4 years now, I think. I mean, it just feels so much longer because we're soul sisters. We're about less than 24, a little over 24 hours apart. And the moment we met actually through Facebook, one of my only people I've ever met through Facebook and then become such good friends with, we just hit it off instantaneously. And she's just such I don't want to say a spitball, but just so much fire and passion in her. And she just loves to dive deep into the mystery of life and whatever she's doing. And she brings her full self into whatever she's doing. And the last year or a year and a half, she's been finally giving herself permission to really explore the mysterious path of parenthood and her passion to bring consciousness not only into her own parenthood, but into other people's lives through their parenthood. So I've just been totally blown away at her path and how she's been able to really learn to reparent herself, which I'm sure she'll talk about as we investigate this topic, in order to be able to be that conscious parent that she wants to be for her son. And it is a mysterious path. So I anticipate we will be talking about parenthood and the mystery behind parenthood today, as well as some other topics that I know that we've wanted to discuss for a while, just online with people. Because, all right, I'm going to shoot it over to Kat and let her do any other little introduction she wants to do for herself.
Thank you, Holly. I'm really excited to be here and be the first of this, yes, exactly, this beautiful journey, and I'm just really excited to be in the mystery of life and be in the mystery of life with you, as a soul sister and a friend, and all of that that we share with each other. And I just want to point out that you called me a spitball, not a spitfire.
I can tell. So one thing you're going to get to know about me on these podcasts is I'm horrible at those popular colloquial sayings. I often get them wrong. So I apologize up front.
Me too. And I love it because it just makes for more laughs.
Thank God this life needs it, right?
So, yes, thank you. That was a beautiful introduction. And I am super passionate about spitballs and parenting. But they go perfectly together, actually, because I have a boy and he loved spitballs. And parenting a boy is definitely a whole other world. And my parent coaching is not specifically about parenting boys, but having a son has opened me up so much to, which I'm sure we'll get into, my own stuff around the masculine energy and being a parent of the masculine energy and what that reflects into me and my own masculine energy. and then my relationship with other masculine energies in my life. And so just a little bit about my business as a parent coach and a conscious parenting coach is I love helping parents redefine what is possible for themselves through changing their mindset and really owning their parenting so they can own their life. And like even exploring, what does it mean for me to own my parenting? And we really do that through exploring values, strengths, and rooting into confidence so that they can create a parenting style that grows with them and their child. And they feel really rooted in all of the stuff that comes up as a parent through all of the phases. My son's going to be 13, and my parenting style based on my values and my strengths is growing with him.
Yeah.
And those tools are growing, you know, with him. And of course, some tools kind of fall off the wayside or have to be redefined as we go into different phases with each other. But really, it's about the parent reparenting themselves, rooting into what is it that they envision for their life and their family, and then parenting from there.
Love it.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm learning, and so again, first podcast, even though I've done a couple interviews, but I'm gonna give myself permission to not be looking directly at everybody if I need to take some notes for later on.
Yeah.
Okay, so one of the things I wanted to do on my podcast was to start off with an embodied practice, because that is part of what the Mystery School is we're about getting back into our senses, into our body, so that we can therefore tap into the mysterious world of our 5D senses. And so I'm gonna walk us through a practice that I have an actual online course for that's also in the process of being developed out further, called Exploring Safe Connection, really with yourself. The first step is we're gonna slow down, and sometimes, when I teach this in person, sometimes people find out that they need to actually maybe shake some stuff off before they can slow down. The second step will be that we're going to turn inwards and just take a moment to center ourselves in our own energy field and in our own experience, so that we can do the third thing, which is to read our own body language. So I didn't ask for your permission. This is a surprise for Kat, but are you okay jumping in?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to give us permission. If we need to stand up and that goes off the screen, we can do that. If we need to stand up and shake anything off before we do the slow down. I'm going to stand up because I know I have some stuff to shake off from the last 24 hours or so. All right, go ahead and shake it off. Woo! And isn't it a mystery of how much more room you can have by doing something just so simple as shake it off. I'm thinking of Taylor Swift right now. Woo!
Taylor Swift.
Taylor, whatever. Whatever. You know what I mean. All right.
Or Steven Tyler. I mean, you know.
All right. I know. I feel already so much better from just doing that, even in community with my sister. So just getting our feet hip width apart on the ground, shoulders back and down, lifting up through the front, grounding down through the back, finding a nice comfortable place for your hands, and just turning inwards, using that juice of movement to slow down. Taking a few deep breaths. And of course, I didn't invite you out there in podcast land to join along with us, but this is a practice I would invite you to do along with us. And when you find you're in that stillness, just to take a breath or two to tune in and see what calls to you in your body and what your language is saying around that. And when you're ready, just opening your eyes first to your own embodied self. So lowering your head, fluttering the eyes open so you can see your own body, your own place on this earth first. And when you're ready, joining us back here on the podcast, and I'm just going to ask Kat from this place, where did your body speak to you, and what felt alive in that body language for you?
I felt really rooted through my feet, and in my sit bones, and my lower half just feels exactly where it needs to be. That's what came up for me. I'm exactly where I need to be.
Yeah. My awareness was I just needed to breathe, and just remembering that the breath comes first, and in that my shoulders relaxed and I could feel the tingliness of spirit move through me, and the energy move through me. So thank you for joining me in that practice that grounds us and roots us into where we need to be in the moment. And yeah, I thought I was going to start with the question that you saw on my list, but I think I'm going to ask a different question and be like, what's alive for you in this mystery of life right now, in this moment?
What comes up for me when I ask that is that nothing stays the same. Like, even though I feel very rooted and grounded in this knowing of who I am, that's always changing. And that's always evolving, and my understanding of what I think I understand is always opening up more and deeper to like new understandings that are already there but feel new but feel familiar. So it's just this really interesting dance and holding of myself and understanding of myself and people, not just myself. Just the more that I can do that for myself, the more I can see that in others, and more I can hold that kind of space for my son.
Yeah. So that would be my next question is where do you see that practice actually becoming out of that metaphysical idea into your daily life?
Just this very real knowing that if I'm consistently learning and growing, then my son is as well. And the more I can extend compassion and that kind of understanding towards myself, the less rigid I can be with him and my parenting and my expectations, and the more compassionate and open and understanding I can be with him, and the more heard he's going to feel, and more loved and embraced and understood. And then also, when people feel that way, then there's an opportunity for connection, and then they want to share more, which is what parents really want. We want parents that want to be engaged. They want their kids to tell them things, converse with them, tell them all the little secrets and how they're feeling, and they want to feel like they're a place where kids can land and trust. Yeah,
absolutely. So where do you feel like we as parents in this mystery of trying to understand ourselves have some of our biggest blocks towards connecting with our kids?
I think the biggest block is taking how we were parented and using those tools. And parenting from a place of how we were parented. And sometimes, and there are, I'm sure, people out there that were parented from a place of love and understanding, and they have this fairy tale story, and that's great. That's not the majority of us, though.
I was gonna say, really? I don't think I've ever heard of those.
The majority of us have stuff. To me, I truly believe, like, we're born into a human body. We are born to a family. We are going to have family stuff. It's just the way it goes. Even if you have the most fairy tale type of lifestyle, you're still that may be your block. Oh, I had a fairy tale lifestyle and that's my block. Like, I'm going to expect everything to be fairy tale and it's not. And sometimes what I've noticed in working with parents and just being so deep in, Holly, you know, I love the topic of parenting and I seem to be always talking about it. It really is my life. And that even if you think you're not parenting like your parent and you've done everything you can to be opposite of your parent, what I have found is that still parenting from how you were parented, because now you are basing your parenting on what you didn't get or what you did get, which is still basing it off how you were parented. Now it's coming from a fear place of like, well, I don't want to be like my mom, and that's fear-based, or I don't want to be like my dad, and that's fear-based. So I think our biggest block, going back to your question, is not examining why we're parenting the way we are and where it comes from.
Yeah, which I just get the chills about, because that's all about being conscious in every area of our life, right? Like being able to wake up and asking those questions of, you know, am I parenting like my parents? If not, how, instead of jumping into, well, I'm parenting because I, you know, in the opposite direction of my parents, which I even remember in my recovery from life class, they showed that cycle of usually one generation will be really strict, another generation will be really lax, the next generation. So in order to change that pattern of awareness, we have to be able to really ask ourselves those questions.
Yeah.
So asking that question, like, what was there a point in your journey into this conscious parenting world, or a series of points that you can attribute to what started to wake you up to ask these deeper questions that so many of us don't around parenting?
Yeah. You know, the first thing that comes up for me is in my early 20s, I was already aware, and this is before I had my son. I had my son at 29. In my early 20s, I was already aware that I was behaving from a place of pain. And if I kept doing that, I was actually 20.
Okay.
21, put myself in a program.
I'm sorry, I stated that a little bit. You were in a program by 21?
Yeah, I had put myself in a program.
Put yourself in a program, okay.
Yeah, at 21, right, actually 20, turned 21 in the program. And the reason why I had done that is because I knew I was reacting from a place of pain, and I needed other tools that had not been given to me in my childhood. So at a very, young age, I was already aware that I was operating from this place that was not going to do me well. So I was already looking for answers at a very young age. And then still made a bunch of funky decisions in my 20s. And, as a young person operating from pain and doing stuff, and being the extrovert that I am, very much out there in the world. And when I became pregnant with my son, I remember a very poignant moment in my pregnancy where he kicked. And this light turned on in me. It was the first kick I felt.
Okay.
This light turned on in me where it's like, oh my goodness. I remember looking down. I remember exactly where I was. I looked down at my belly and I'm like, I'm bringing a life into this world. Me, like crazy. Like at that time, I thought of myself as a crazy person. Like, who said that I could bring a life into this world? Do they know who I am? Do they know the decisions I've been making? Like, this is insane. Yeah. And now, 13 years later, I have softened a lot more. But at that point, I went into full throttle, like, this is the kind of mom I'm going to be, and which in my program, I help parents kind of release that and learn how to be more gentle, because that isn't always the best way. But at the time, I needed that. I needed to go like the pendulum swing to the other side and really wake up to what kind of parent do you want to be?
Yeah.
And
awesome.
This is a huge responsibility, which, Root to Rise conscious parenting program is really about what kind of parent do you want to be, and how are you creating that environment through your relationship with yourself, right? And then bringing that out, that energy into your family. And sometimes we can get a little too serious about that. So, yeah.
We got to laugh it up a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, this is like the $1 million question to me in a mystery school of where some people start to have that little seed, that little light of awareness that something in their life needs to change, where other people just don't. They just keep on their same patterns. We know people in their 40s and 50s who are still repeating patterns that they did in their 20s and 30s. And
Yeah.
so you said at 20, you knew you were living from a place of pain. And that wasn't okay with you anymore. So I'm just wondering if you can, put yourself back into that, 19, 20-year-old. Where did that awareness come from? Did it come from an earlier point in your life that you've carried forward, or was there an event or somebody spoke something into your life?
There's so much of my story that I haven't shared publicly yet, and I'm in this place of loving myself through that process of wanting to share my full story, and how and when does that happen, and detaching my current self from the stories of my past, right? So I'm currently in that process, and what comes up for me is like I have tears behind my eyes because I can easily go back to that feeling, and I remember that feeling of that 20-year-old. And what comes up for me with that is I had so much pain growing up and losing my father at 12 and not getting the support I needed emotionally.
Yeah.
As a young person. Not that I wasn't loved, and I was born into a family with a whole lot of love, but also a whole lot of just unrealized, just not shadows not looked at.
Yeah.
Adults without tool sets that work on shadows. Just completely different generation and culture, coming from Brazilian culture and being a first generation American, which adds a whole nother layer to things. So in going through from 12 to 20, there always was this voice behind everything. And I really attribute that to the spirituality that came from a religious background that my parents so lovingly gave to me. And I'm super grateful for. And that connection to something deeper inside of myself, that even when I went completely off the mark and off the path, there was something that would be like, nope, wait a minute. Nope, wait a minute. And I'm really grateful for that. And so I believe everybody has that. We just have a lot of layers, some more than others, on top of that. And so part of what I love to do with parents is let's peel these layers off to get to that core, because I believe everybody has that. And so your question, I feel is, what do I feel is asking me, what do I feel is that thing that was able to get me to that place? And the best way I know how to explain that is that it was something that always lived inside of me. And I had people in my life to remind me of that. Even though sometimes they were the same people that were part of like the negative chatter, right? And I just kept coming back to that, and thankfully listened to a call that said, pick up the phone and call your aunt and ask for help, which is what happened when I was 20. And my aunt is my godmother. And she has been a strong force in my life regarding spirituality and things like that. My mother as well. And I listened,
Yeah.
you know, yeah, I listened even though I was scared, and I had no idea what the heck I was getting into. And it was scary to make a huge life change at the age of 20. While everybody else was going off to college, I was going off to a program to like deal with my pain.
Yeah.
Right.
But I would say in a way that gave you such an advantage to the rest of us that just like, you know, on my other end, I was in so much pain and I had no idea how much pain I was in. I mean, I knew, but I didn't know. And I just like, I'm just going to keep going, right? Where instead of like stopping, slowing down, turning inwards and looking at that body language to be able to start to eradicate it. But the core of what I'm hearing is that it was really about the spiritual piece for you. And the spiritual piece was about returning to this inner knowing that it, you know, it was okay to deviate off the path, because that reminded of you of what your path really was, and that you were doing this back and forth until you were able to stay more firmly here. And the mystery of, you know, nothing's black and white in this culture. You know, there's very few of us that just do the straight and narrow spiritual path 100%. There's very few of us that are always a saint and never the sinner. It's just that's the mystery. But I think that what I'm hearing is that there was this spiritual piece of you. And so my next curiosity is, because you say that's what you love to do with parents, is to be able to bring them back to that. But how did you start coming back to that core for yourself more fully? Like, what were maybe some of the practical things that you did in your life? Not some of the esoterical things, but the practical things.
Yeah. So the practical thing, most recently, and I'll work backwards. The most recently, because at the age of 20, I didn't realize that I was speaking my pain through abusing my body. I didn't understand that. I didn't have that kind of languaging. The world was a bit different back then. Yoga was widespread. You know, this was in 1998, right? So yoga wasn't as widespread. Mindfulness, somatics, like all these words now that feel like we're just, you and I, especially because this is our industry, our wellness industry, and the world we live in. As individuals and as business, we're just swimming in, it's just constant. So I didn't have that awareness back then. So I'll work backwards. Now at this age, my practice is definitely about getting into the body. And I know that when I can release any tension that's in the body and unlayer, back to that unlayering, I have easier access to how I'm feeling. I have easier access to listen to what's going on. So I use that a lot. So through yoga, through other types of movement, sometimes simple, just stretching. Also having a routine where I make space to listen to my body, listen to my voice. So a morning routine, and meditation. Really love like a formal sit. And so I use that a lot. And that is how, one of the ways where I get a lot of messages and downloads, I'm quieting down. And I want to to say what's coming up for me right now is this feeling of spirituality for me is a feeling of being rooted and embraced, like held and supported. And so and I think that's important to know, because maybe somebody, if whoever is listening to this, they're like, what does that mean? The spirituality thing that kind of just floats out there. And so that's how I describe it, is just this rooted, embraced, and supported kind of feeling that comes from the inside. And so the yoga, so getting in the body, and then dealing with the mind, the stuff that's coming up, having a few truths, foundational truths that I can always come back to. So what are my personal values, my personal truths, those anchors? And I have 3 that I work with, specifically for parents in the parenting program, and for myself, and then body, mind, heart, and then I have other practices that I love, that is like singing, nature, talking to friends, talking to girlfriends, getting in community. I'm an extrovert, so I love being out in my community and being an activist and connecting with people and seeing people transform their life, because that's spirituality as well. That's how I feed my spirituality. It's not just me sitting at my meditation altar praying and singing. It's me getting out in my community and connecting with others and seeing them light up and seeing what transforms their lives, right? Yeah. So those are very practical ways of feeding spirituality.
Yeah. I love your definition of being, you said centered, embraced, and supported, or rooted,
embraced, and like supported. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. My definition of spirituality is a deep connection to yourself. And like, I love the idea of taking that definition and wrapping your definition around it and being like, just breaking the paradigm, because, even when I asked that question, I knew you weren't going to say, oh, I go sit in a pew and do this, and, but there's still this pattern of, she's going to mention that she goes to church, and she's going to mention that she does, this, and this. And it was like, I love that you didn't mention that, because it got me, and I think that, to anyone listening, spirituality is about finding how you can connect to yourself so you can feel rooted, centered, grounded, supported, and embraced. And it can be so different for all of us. And there's no one right path to spirituality.
It's your personal relationship. Whatever you want.
It's about finding that creative soul force and connecting it back out to the breath, the spirit that moves through all of us. So my next question then is, because I know I have been so in awe of how you help Josiah move through this, your son, move through this and find his version of spirituality. So what has that dance been like for you?
It's starting to feel like the typical preacher son, story. You hear those stories of like, the preacher's son is the naughtiest kid of them all. And I say that because, not that I'm labeling my son as naughty, but he definitely, because I am this way, he's not naughty. But he definitely, God, I love that kid, because he so just makes me work on myself. Because he's just really, I told him this yesterday, he's really doing his best to be different than me and his dad. And so his latest thing is, I'm not that type of guy. Literally, he says that to me. I'm not that type of guy. And I'm like, all right. Right? And so because I'm so open with my spirituality, because I believe everyone is spiritual. It's just, I'm so open with my spirituality. And he thinks I meditate all day long. Like, it's so funny to hear his view of me. He thinks I meditate all day long and I do yoga all day. He told me the other day, you're addicted to yoga and meditation. I'm like, I wish. I wish I was, right. It's funny, their perception of us. So the dance has been, I've taken him to church, you know, since he was little, since he was born. We go to a kind of a Unitarian church, Center for Spiritual Living here in San Jose, and it embraces all paths, all belief systems. You can believe in Jesus, you can believe in Allah, Buddha, all of that, and still be in community with people, talking about the practical aspects of spirituality and how to be a spiritual person in everyday life. And so he goes to church with me and he enjoys it, but his dance has been, I don't believe in that. That's your stuff now. And so for me as a spiritual parent, I really, what that does for me is I keep coming back to my values, my faith, and knowing that regardless if he believes or not, he is guarded, gifted, and guided, which are the words I've been saying to him since he was little. And he has his journey, just like I did, to reject it and then come back to what works for him.
Yeah.
You know, and me as the steward of our relationship and our family environment and my own spirituality and the spirituality that lives inside of our home, I just have to keep putting the work into the faith of that and know that he's got angels around him that go with him wherever he goes, whether he believes it or not. And that, you know, God's doing what needs to be done in that relationship. Like his relationship with his spirituality is his own. And I just have to stay centered and grounded in my values and not shift and be like, oh, well, maybe I should be less of myself, you know, around him. So I see that happen. And I even have had some of those, like, not tendencies, but like ideas of like, well, I should be less of, like, no, I'm still going to be me. I'm still going to take you to church. I'm still going to do he does this funny thing where he thinks I meditate all day. So he's like, yeah, this is you, mom. Hum, da, da, hum, da, da, hum, 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 da, da, da. Because sometimes I do some kirtan chanting in my room. And, you know, so I'm still going to do my thing and be me. And this is who I was meant to be in his life. He was given me for a reason, right? So having that confidence that I'm exactly the parent that he needs to be. And guess what? I have to practice letting go that he may never, ever come back to what I think is best for him.
Yeah. You
and I talk about that a lot. You know that.
I know. And I've been trying to, like, as you're talking, I'm like, oh, I could dive into the divine masculine or the masculine feminine dance right here between even moms and sons. And this other topic, y'all, we talk constantly every day, so we know each other so well. And one of the topics that came up this weekend, and I can see my son coming in right now, I am doing a live broadcast with Kat. All right, I'll be letting go. No, Bubba, I told you I would let you know. Yeah, he's learning the practice of letting go, y'all, which is what we're going to dive into here, because he poured some water accidentally on his computer and he's becoming a YouTube star, he thinks. Cheering him on, at least. Anyways, but yeah, one of the topics we wanted to talk about, and I love that this is just a real life, this is a real life podcast, is
we're moms.
We are moms, and we are... There's no training ground for being a parent. It's just a mystery of, like, you know, if you've ever been a parent or your auntie or uncle and you're on this other side of, like, you know, once having been a kid and now you're on the other side, it's just a freaking mysterious, messy path. And we just kind of, there's no book. Like, they try to write all these books about it. This is, as my own parenting, I realized as a young parent, probably about, well, maybe not that young, 7 or 8 years into my, you know, my oldest kid. So my 8 years of my mom is, if there was one awesome way of parenting, there'd be one awesome book that we all knew about. And we would know the method and it would work. And because it's so varied, because each soul is so different, you know, anyways, that's my own philosophy going into that. But yes, I wanted to dive into, you know, we being mothers of boys. I have 2 boys myself, and I have a 13-year-old and I have a almost 11-year-old that you just almost kind of saw. And it being on a feminine path on top of this. So not just being a mother, but being in this place in the world where the feminine is been resurrecting her soul and doing all of this deep work to come alive to what the creation of patriarchy has done to all of us, not just to women, but to all of us. And we get to see that being mothers of boys. And how do you dance this dance of just feeling whether this question wants to go, like, how do we dance this dance of being in this place in the earth where we're learning how much we've compromised as women and as mothers towards the masculine that even shows up in our sons, and letting go, letting those old stories die off, those old patterns die off of how we need to show up as mothers and when we need to show up as mothers. I mean, just that question can go like, so yeah, I don't know if there's really a question, but I definitely wanted to dive in this with Kat. We both agreed this is somewhere we wanted to go. So I'm just gonna shoot it back over to you and say, what's alive for you right now that you're willing to share and get real with yourself, and with the mystery school world to be, because it's a mystery.
You know, right now my son is shifting into the teenage years. And so there's a lot of letting go happening right now. And for the first time ever, really, in our relationship, he's irritated with me. Like, I have an easygoing kid. He's always been fun and loving and athletic and want to play. It was very rare that he was prickly and upset and moody. Like, that was me in the relationship, you know. Like, thank goodness we didn't need 2 of me. You know, and now he's going into this shifting where I'm annoying and I'm hovering, and he doesn't want to be told what to do, and he doesn't want to be reminded. It makes him feel like a baby. And so what I've been doing more of is shutting my mouth more and listening. And that's huge for me. I talk a lot. And I want my ideas to be heard. And I come from a large family of strong, beautiful women who want to be heard and want to be the center of attention. So that's been a huge practice for me in my parenting. It's like, how do I share space with this other person? How do I share the limelight with this other person, right? My son. And in my parenting right now, what is huge for me, what's coming up for me is I don't need that limelight. Like, this is not, even though it is about me in the reparenting aspect, it's not about me. This is like his time to discover himself, let go, make mistakes. I mean, they make mistakes along the way. I'm 42 and I'm still making mistakes, but really to have this space to fall and know that he can fall, but I'm there. I'm there with compassion and listening. You know, the relationship, because he's not needing me in the same capacity, and he's and it's not so much like, okay, mom, gotta go, like I'm growing up. It's like, sometimes he's just pushing me away. I'm realizing that he's doing that because I'm trying to hold on. And once I notice, I'm like, oh, wait a minute, I don't want him to have to push me away. Let me loosen a little bit. And then I notice that he relaxes a little bit more, and then he's a little bit more willing to still stick around, right? Like, still be in relation with me and in energy with me, as long as I'm not all over him. So just giving him that space. And then what I've been realizing is like, oh, but that space also can be scary for me because I'm so used to mothering a certain way. Oh, okay. So I have to shift the way I've been mothering. Oh, I have energy and attention for myself. So how do I feel about that? Right? What's coming up for me in that? So that's been huge for us. And not taking things personal has been huge. And just knowing that I planted the seeds and will continue to. It's not like I'm done with my mothering. It's just shifted, and he doesn't need me in the same way, and nor does he want me in the same way. Even though he may need me sometimes, he definitely doesn't want me, and me pushing myself on him just makes it worse. So I wonder, am I answering the question? Because that's what's coming up. No, I'm not.
I mean, it's all beautiful, but let me help correct a little bit. So
Okay.
So one of the things that I have taught in the past and I'm resurrecting in my own work is teaching the red tent. So the blood mystery. And the blood mysteries are way beyond our actual, what Kat and I call our lua or our moon flow when we actually have our period, but it's about the teachings from Ancient of Days where women were actually respected and honored for all of the different shifts we make in our lives into different beings, not just different stages, but different beings. We go from, you know, being a girl, I can never say that word, pre-puberty. It's a mystery. Prepubescent. There we go. Yeah. I'll say that one 5 times fast. So we go from being a young girl, pre-period, into becoming, you know, a young maiden woman who has her cycle, who is now ready to be this fertile, birthing, nurturing. I mean, her body's designed to this, into becoming the mother that's actually designed to give and nourish and sustain life, into stopping her bleeding and holding her wisdom, her blood. The blood represents wisdom and power and life inside of herself. And we used to have initiations into all these different stages built into the circle of what, you know, we call nowadays red tent. I don't know that they called it back then. That would help us make those deaths, because it's a death of one part of ourselves, resurrecting into a new part, a new being, a new aspect of our life here on earth. And I remember reading in one of my books that I've read, can't remember where, but there was one tribe in the world that actually had some, like, it was a huge number. It was like 30 or 60 different pronouns for the woman in every stage she went through. So my question more is about, you know, this mysterious path, and you'll probably get to know my own story if you watch the podcast or go back and watch Wild, but I heard a call when my kids were still pretty young that I needed to be willing to let go of being that daily mother in their life. And I resisted that for years until it became finally evident that that was my call, and that I'm part of rewiring and rewriting this pattern for women of what motherhood looks like and what womanhood looks like. And making that transition much earlier than I ever anticipated of letting go of being that daily mother into finding something different. And it's a difficult transition because it is such a huge depth, not just of your own physical daily life, but of the story that we have put on mothers for the most part. I wouldn't say everybody, this is a generalization, take it if it fits, but for the most part, especially because the masculine, I think, has been missing for so long, there's been so much more pressure on women because we've had to step up and really do most of their child rearing, that if you now see that the need for you to be around is less and the desire of your kids for you to be around is less, you're labeled as selfish, as self-serving, you know, a bad mother, like all of these things. And so my question to dive back in and give it over to Kat here is, like, on an emotional level, like, how are you navigating this? And what is this feeling like, this death feeling like for you? And what's, you know, what's coming up that you're having to investigate, and what tools are you using to investigate that and be with that?
Well, thank you for, yes. And I was envisioning all the different cycles. I saw myself at all those different stages. And yesterday I had a realization of I'm in the beginning stages of empty nesting. And
I'm sorry, I missed that first.
Empty nesting? Empty nester.
Yes.
Right, beginning. Yeah.
And it's a real thing, y'all. It's real.
It's real. And as a solo mom, or I don't even like to say solo mom, single mom. I don't label myself as a single mom. When I say I'm just a mom, but as a mom who's not currently in a relationship, has a partner living in her home with her. This is why people say single mom, because it's so much easier, shorter. You know, when he's not here, there's even more space. So what's been coming up for me emotionally is what I touched on a bit is that spaciousness yesterday was feeling crushing and expansive at the same time.
Yeah.
And that there's a mix of fear and excitement. So right now what's going on is I'm really excited and curious about this new stage because there's so much space. And at the same time, oh my gosh, there's so much space. It could be anything. What's the mystery, right? So there's that's happening because I always have been a mom that didn't put my son number one. Like being a mom and doing my work in the world have always been like share number one spot. So, and I've had my own labels and emotions and stories around that, like not feeling like a good enough mom, feeling self-centered or selfish, because self-centered is good, selfish, you know, and having all these labels, especially as a Latin mom, that's just not how I should be in the kitchen. I should all these things, right? And not pursuing a business or a career, and definitely I wasn't putting my son first. So I've always been that kind of mom that has been pursuing my self-care and my evolution. And now that there's space for it even more so, where I want to say it's almost acceptable, the cycle that we're going into, because he's becoming a teenager, so it's acceptable. I'm like, wait a minute, but no, I'm not ready. Like, what about that thing you need? What about the enchiladas I made yesterday? Like, don't you need that? You know, like, it's really funny to watch myself go through that. And it's almost like I'm trying to take back a little bit of the pieces of the previous stages. And it's like, well, now we can really do some more of those things now. It's interesting. I was watching myself yesterday, and he's like, he doesn't want to be babied that way anymore. He doesn't need to be babied that way anymore. So some of those emotions are coming up where I felt myself like, oh, I didn't do enough of that, you know, when he was little. And so seeing that and being very real that those things are coming up and knowing that it's part of the shift has been part of my process. Also, addressing the fact that there is so much space now, and what do I want to do with it? Yeah. Right? And then also asking, what do I want a relationship to look like now? What is possible for our relationship? If he doesn't need me in the same way, but yet I want to remain connected with him always. Yeah. And be this safe place for him to come to, then who do I need to be for myself first? So that I'm already that person when he comes. Yeah. To connect with me, not to be me for him and for our relationship, but to be me for me, because he doesn't need me in the same way. So now I'm like, oh, I have to be me for me. Yeah. And sometimes that could be scary, right? Like, oh, I've been being for this other person, but now this other person doesn't need me to be the same way anymore. So now I have to be me for me. Oh shit. Okay. What does that look like? You know? And so my practice, say again?
Where does that motivation come from? Like, it really helps you get recentered and like, where have I been motivating myself from to do my
right. Yeah. And it's like, well, you know, and what I asked myself yesterday is like, well, it's not an option to not live out my dreams just because now I don't have this kid and being a mom in the same way to motivate me. That's not an option because that's just not who I am. I'm just going to sit around, live out my dreams. So what is it that I need to shift? What is it that I need to heal? What parts of like my little mama heart are feeling so tender that I need to give it some love? What stories do I need to let go of? And getting out of, oh my gosh, I'm losing this thing, the death, right? And instead being like, oh my gosh, I'm gaining this thing. Like yesterday he came over, he was with his dad yesterday, and he came over and I'm looking at him like I'm gaining this funny, so different than me boy, although yet so similar. You know, and all these ways that he's different and these stories. He's really into this new hip hop, trap, hop, I don't know what you call it. It's something. And he's really into this music. Not the music I was into at 12 and still not into that at this age. And, you know, I get to discover other things and I get to watch him be into these things that he gets so excited about. And so in relating back to like this death cycle and coming into the rebirth, it's like, oh, I get to enjoy this new phase, not only of him, but of me.
Right. Amen, sister.
And just saying that, like, there's tears in my eyes. Because, like, I was me way before he came along. You know, like, I thought being a mother, becoming a mother has been the most pivotal thing I have chosen for my life.
Yeah.
And yet, this that is inside of me existed way before him.
Yeah.
And the best thing that I can do for him as his mother is to show up as my full self in my full power, always. And to believe that my power only comes from being his mother does not serve me or him. No. And you helped remind me, right? You helped me remember that yesterday.
Yeah.
You know, in our personal conversations. Yeah. And so that, I don't know if I answered the question, but that's where the question took me. And so the death of that phase is the rebirth, is this beauty of watching this boy grow into this young man and supporting him in a different way.
Yeah.
Whatever it may look like, because he makes choices that I don't like already. I mean, his music choice is one.
I know.
You know, but again.
Yeah. We're never guaranteed that we're going to like our kids and all their choices, you know? We'll love them.
You know?
But
love them. And finding the places where I do like him. And I even told him yesterday, like his sense of style and the things that he likes. I said, you know, thanks for keeping things interesting. I told him that, thanks for keeping things interesting. And it's a guaranteed laughs, for sure. Guaranteed laughs with that kid. Some of the things that he comes up with and he gets excited about. You know, and just finding the beauty in that.
Yeah. I loved jumping back into the early part of when you dove in with that question of this crushing feeling, but this expansion at the same time. And I just immediately got the vision of a baby coming out of the birth canal, and how you're in this place that feels very constricted, but it's all you know, so it feels expansive. And then you go down literal constriction and into the death. You're squeezed out of all of that amniotic fluid, and then you come into this beautiful expansion, and it's freaking scary and cold and lights and like, oh my gosh, what am I doing here? I don't have tools. I don't know this stage of the journey yet. And it's scary and it's beautiful. And that's what I call the pregnant void. Like, even though, you know, you just were in this womb and literally being pregnant, you know, or impregnating somebody else. I don't know how you could describe that, but like, now you're in this pregnant void of infinite possibilities, which that to me, in my book, I'm going to be writing about this a lot, the death is life. The pregnant void is this place of infinite possibilities where death of one stage of our lives or one place or relationships or jobs or places we lived get to do that metamorphic decomposing, and we get to sit in that pregnant void. If we are wise, we train ourselves to sit in that so that we can see where the next pregnancy and birth will be. And I think that is, that's beautiful that you felt that, and you're in that, and you're sitting in that, and you're like, I don't know, like, you know, but being able to see that the birth is the next step, you know, it gives us and you know, this is the story in the book, it gives us so much more of a vivid, visceral, real toolbox to move through our life instead of trying to cling on. You know, I use this example as like, when you try to cling on to sand, it just goes right out of your hand for the most part. You get a little bit left, but if you want more life, you have to hold life like this. You have to hold the sand like this, and that way you can put more life in. And it's a mysterious path. Like, you know, there's no one way to do it, and no one really tells us. In our culture, we don't have these initiations into the next stage. Yeah. And to be mothers at such a young age with such young kids, while knowing ancient history, you know, I would say between late 10s to 13s was a typical time boys would start leaving the nest, you know, but now we're in a day and age where they don't leave the nest till 18 or 21 or 30. And so it's having to rewrite that story. I know my son at 9, my youngest son at 9 is like, Mom, I want to live at home with you when I go to college. I'm like, no, you don't. No, I don't.
You know, and you know, something that I love how you talk about the pregnant void, and I'm feeling into that as I hear you talk about it. And it can be and is scary because you're like floating, right? You're in this new space, and you're like, oh my gosh, and you're having to, in order to be able to be birthed, you have to let go. You have to let go of a lot of tools. If I keep bringing it back to parenting, you have to let go of some of the ways that you were being, and the tools and all of that. And there are still tools that help you feel rooted during this floating period. And what I keep coming back to with my son and with myself is, how do I want to feel in my life? How do I want to feel in this relationship? Do I want a relationship of butting heads and resistance and conflict, and not that conflict is bad, but like consistent conflict that creates trauma? Like, is that what I want? No. So how do I want to feel? Because we usually know what we don't want, right? So what is it that I want? Oh, I want to feel connected with him. I want to have a healthy relationship with him. I want to have laughter. I want to have joy. I want to have appreciation. I want him to feel understood and seen. Yeah. You know, so coming back, and then that helps me in this pregnant void to be like, okay, I may not know exactly what's going to happen, because this like infinite possibilities right now in this new phase, right? But I do know how I want to feel. And so how can I behave and make decisions from that place? I do know what my values are. I do know what my strengths are. So making decisions, and that's why in my program and in the webinar that I'll be, doing soon, and even the conference that I'm a part of in 2 weeks here in San Jose, Parenting Empowerment Conference, it always comes back to what are your values, what are your strengths, and how do you want to feel? Because that will guide you throughout every phase of your parenting, because those are your anchors. You can keep coming back to that. It's like, okay, he's moving and changing and shifting. I'm moving and changing and shifting. But yet the way that I want to feel about myself and my life and him has not changed.
Yeah.
My values have not changed. I have refined them over time, but they haven't changed. I still value communication. I still value love, my spirituality.
Yeah.
Truth, togetherness. Yeah. And these are all the things that I teach. And I help parents really ground into this so that as life starts changing, they're like, whoa, wait a minute, time out. And I'll do that with him. Time out. Like, can I get a redo? Yeah, can I get a redo? Because my value is communication. And yet that was not loving communication that I just.
Yeah.
And he's like, yeah, you can get a redo. Thank you.
Yeah.
So there are tools to help us in the pregnant void as well.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
I love it.
I know. I love all the parenting.
You can talk about there all day. I know I can talk about this stuff all day.
All day. Well, we kind of do. Our voice text back and forth. But I know we need to wrap it up for you and for the listening audience of the Mystery School. And so there was one question that I honed in on is, I know as myself, and I'm going to give just for the audience a bigger understanding of patterns. So patterns are energetic, and everything starts in the energetic world. And if we're unconscious, or sometimes even consciously plugging ourselves into a certain story or a certain label, that's kind of why like Kat and I are like, oh, labels, like we're plugging ourselves into that energy, we're plugging ourselves into that pattern. And that pattern, because patterns drive life and they drive our behavior to make it easier to live, right? That's what patterns are, the purpose of patterns are. Then we often can, even as conscious people, enact unconsciously in the pattern. And so I was wondering, because as you mentioned this, I was like, oh, I think I've unconsciously acted in this pattern where it was like, okay, I knew my truth, which my truth had been, at some point earlier than you think, you're going to be letting go of your kids. And yet, because I was still stuck in this pattern of, but that's not a mother's role, that's not okay for a woman, that's selfish, that's yada, 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 I would still find myself acting out and speaking out in that pattern versus in my truth. And I'm just wondering, there was a point in your story where you stopped and you were like, oh, but is that, I don't remember now what it exactly was. I just knew I wanted to bring that out. Like, do you find yourself, even though you know your truth, sometimes still unconsciously acting out in that pattern of our societal story, I guess?
Oh my gosh, yeah. I mean, that was something, I'm glad that you're bringing this, because that was something I wanted to mention about my story. Going back to being like an awakened 20-year-old, right? It still took me figuring out what patterns, what habits that I've been doing to get me to that painful part. And it still took me, who knows, 1 year to discover one layer of this one habit, 5 years to discover this other, and so on and so on and so on. And so even now as a conscious parent, my biggest pattern is I feel I need to control in order to make things happen, right? And I see myself do it, and I know that that's not the truth. And really, what do I have control over? Myself, really. Exactly, this right here. And I see myself go do it because I may understand that I am a recovering control freak, right?
Yeah.
But I don't always know the ways in which I'm trying to control, because as a mother, especially as a Latin mother, there is this pattern, this culture, this like prescription that we're handed, that we have to be a certain way because we're Latin mothers. You have to be controlling, you have to yell, you have to, you know, you're very spicy, you're very fiery, you tell people what's up. Like, and of course this is generalization, not every Latin mother is like that, but I think most people would say, oh, Latin people are fiery, right? All up in your kid's business, you know, things like that. Always telling people how you think, regardless of the chaos that it's going to create. And so, yeah, finding, like, so I know my values, and I may know exactly what gets me in trouble, the patterns that get me in trouble, but I don't always know, or I didn't always know, I'm much better at it now, how it shows up.
Yeah.
Right? And sometimes I'll do something and I'm like, oh, there that thing is. Oh, it shows up like that. Interesting. Okay, let's stay aware of that. Or it shows up in those words. Yeah. Or interesting, I value communication, yet when I'm hangry, my communication goes downhill. So then I need to make sure I'm not getting hangry. Yeah. Right? Yeah, just certain things. Yeah, there's not perfect at all.
Yeah, and I think that's where the idea of grace and mercy from the Christian, you know, faith comes in, is like, we've got to be gracious and compassionate on ourselves, because this has been a study of mine in depth, I would say, in the last probably 4 to 5 years, more and more, is like how heavy, you know, it's not just that we're breaking our own patterns, but we're breaking, like, there's something called morphic fields. It's more of a theory, but it's in the quantum physics world of, like, there's patterns not just within us that we're breaking, but within the societal energy world. And so realizing that and being conscious of that, I think, brings in more compassion and more grace, and, you know, just understanding that it's going to be a mysterious ride no matter what, and just hold on to your core values and your purpose and your mission along the way, because you're going to be in the pregnant void most of your life, because it's mostly a death and a rebirth all at the same time. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. But in what, I'm going to give you a second here to tout what you're doing in the world here coming up in the next couple of weeks. But one question to end on, since you are bringing this passion of, you know, conscious parenting forward, bringing your spirituality into your consciousness, what is one thing that, and this is a huge question, I'm just realizing, so take it as you need, is there one thing you could recommend to parents that are just stepping on board to realizing they want to parent in a different way? If there was one thing that you could leave them with as we leave today, what would that be?
Take a look at how you're taking care of yourself. That's the first thing. The first thing really came up was body. The word body immediately popped into my mind, because when we're stressed, we hold all of that in our body. And there's no space. When everything's constricted, there's no space. So if you really are looking to learn something, I'm getting chills all over my body right now. Yeah. If you're looking to learn something new and bring on new tool sets, and I always envision, like, I have this tool belt right here.
You're a little handy woman. You're a handy woman.
Yeah. Tool belt. And if you're envisioning learning something new, you have to make space for it. And in order to make space, you're going to have to let go. And we hold stress and stories and our trauma and our upbringing, and even things that may not be what we consider trauma, but just like all this conditioning in our bodies. So the number one thing I would say to do is get into how you're taking care of yourself and your body first, and make space in that way. And if you're open to breath practice, bringing more breath into your body. And exploring that before you try to go and put new information in, because there isn't going to be space for it. And then I believe in the power of community and support and so finding either groups or a mentor, a coach that can help you with this, because there are a lot of parenting programs out there, parenting books, like you said, but getting to the nitty gritty of your personal stories, your personal conditioning is really where the magic happens. And why you're parenting the way that you're parenting and being held. And as a parent, we can feel so alone on this journey, even if we're surrounded by so many other parents and all of the ways that we can have community, we can still feel so alone in our story. And so when you connect to a coach or a group coaching or some sort of community that's very intentionally working on this stuff, it helps with that alone feeling and feeling embraced and supported. So
because we're community people, we're social people, we're meant to be, and sometimes you might know the answers, but you just need somebody there to embrace you and bring you back to your center and feel supported. And of course, your first recommendation, right on, that's what the 3-step process of slowing down, turning inwards, creating space by doing the shaking, slowing down, turning inwards, reading the body language, seeing where you need to pay attention to. And that's also why the first lesson in the mystery school is about the power of death, and that death is life, because only in death can you create that space for more life. Otherwise, you're just piling everything on and trying to keep it going, and things will eventually die because you can't. So you've got to be conscious about it.
Nurture everything at once. And if I can say one last thing, maybe ask yourself, what is the one thing that I could work on, and not try to take everything on. Like for me, I took on communication for a few years and still am. It's not like, oh yeah, I'm perfect at communication now I can move on to the next thing. But I consciously worked on how I was communicating, my tone, the words I was using, and so maybe taking one aspect of how you show up in your relationships and putting more attention into that. Just one. So
sometimes we're just like kids. We can only handle one concept at a time. All right. So Kat, how can people reach you? What do you have coming up that they can join you in? And any other little tidbits about your business, your passion?
Thank you, Holly. This has just been so much fun, and thank you for being. So I want to say thank you for being the light that you are in the world and what you're creating, and this mystery school. It's very much needed.
Thank you.
Stuff is so much fun. It's so juicy, and I want everyone to experience it.
I know. Death can be fun, y'all. We'll party on.
Transformation is fun. It really is. Like,
it doesn't have to be all like dum 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 dum, whatever Josiah does. He like does this thing, which is really, and maybe that's not very PC of me for anybody who's watching and does kirtan and it's beautiful. It's all accepted.
It's just my son's interpretation of what he sees when I'm doing kirtan. So I just want to be sensitive to that. So my business is Root to Rise Parent Coaching, and you can find me on Facebook and Instagram as Root to Rise Parent Coach. And so that's the social media. I also have a website, which is R2R, so R, the number 2, rcoaching.com. I'm revamping it right now because it was all yoga before, because I'm also a yoga and mindfulness teacher. And I'm putting my parent coaching in there. And in the next 2 weeks, or actually in the next month, I have a lot going on. So all juicy stuff. In 2 weeks, I will be facilitating a workshop on owning your parenting and owning your life, and just re-evaluating how you're parenting through your strengths and your values. So that's really powerful. And that's at the Parenting Empowerment Conference in Cupertino, California, August 10th from 8 to 6, I believe. Right now we have a discount discount at $99 for the whole day for I'm not the only facilitator. There's so many other people, and the conference itself and every workshop in the conference is built off of the appreciative inquiry practice, which is a strengths-based practice, which is amazing. Okay. So that's happening. And then shortly after that, I'll be doing a webinar on Facebook that will be a week-long webinar. So if you go onto my Facebook page and like me, Root to Rise, Parent Coaching, and Lifestyle, then you'll get all the notifications for that. And I'll be inviting, and I'll have a freebie there, a really juicy freebie that I use with my son that has really helped us in our relationship around technology. The big pain point for parents these days. Yeah. And inviting parents to come on this, deep and fun, expansive journey in the Rooted and Rising Parent Empowerment Program that I'll be kicking off here beginning of September.
Okay. So the webinar is to give some tools, but also to introduce the program that you're developing. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So the webinar we can expect sometime mid to late
August. Mid to late August.
And then the program will start in September. So the dates aren't certain yet. I will attempt to update the show notes so that when people find this, they can find the updated notes. But yeah, I'll have all of your links in the show notes so people can find you and the awesome, beautiful, passionate work you're doing with parents to reach really the next generation so that our kids have so many more tools than we had that we're just now learning in our 30s and 40s and beyond to parent ourselves with. So, all righty, my dear. Thank you so much for joining me on this first episode of Movement Medicine. Let's see if I can get it right. Movement Medicine Mystery School Podcast. Woo! Jazz hands. Awesome. All right. So much love. I'll talk to you in a little bit.